Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR 96.3, 96.3 HD2, and Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Vermonte Bryant in for Harold Fisher, and this is the Insight segment. Well, many folks, they don't participate in the traditional Christmas holiday that has just passed. Instead, many honor the 7 principles of Kwanzaa. Now, some of you may be asking, are people still celebrating Kwanzaa? The answer is yes, they are. And tonight we are discussing it and taking a deep dive into the history, culture, and true meaning of Kwanzaa. Joining me tonight for our conversation is Reverend Dr. Willie Wilson, Pastor Emeritus of Union Temple Baptist Church, and Lori Williamson. She's the author of 111 Places in Black Culture in Washington, D.C. that you must not miss. Reverend Dr. Wilson and Lori, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you.
All right. So, Reverend Wilson, let's talk about Kwanzaa. Today's principle is Kuji Chukalia, which means self-determination, right? So if we start with that, today's lesson, give me that about self-determination and really the historical context of Kwanzaa, why it was established, why it was created.
All right. Well, Kuchakalia, it means to name for ourselves, to speak for ourselves, and to define for ourselves. Dr. Maulana Karinga, my dear brother and friend, established Kwanzaa in 1966 at the height of much turmoil in this country, and as well the advent of a move toward Black culture and Black consciousness. He put together 7 principles related to the word. He came up with the word Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa is spelled in 6 letters. He added a 7th letter to correspond to the 7 principles and the 7 days of Kwanzaa, primarily and foundationally to speak to those principles, those values that have been
Continue, Dr. Wilson. You were talking about a good friend and a good friend of yours, someone that you are close to or at least know.
We worked together on the Million Man March. Of course, I was the executive producer for the program for the Million Man March, and he introduced what he called operational unity. And that's what we're doing this year in Kwanzaa at Union Temple. Of course, the Kwanzaa, as I was beginning to talk about, the principles of Kwanzaa, 7 days, 7 principles, Umoja, Kujitakalia, Ujima, Ujamaa, Nia, Kuumba, and Imani, all those 7 principles, dealing with those principles, those ways of doing, acting, feeling, and thinking that have been passed down from our ancestors from centuries, and even more recently for our ancestors from the last 3 or 4 generations. Principles of family, community, and culture. And that's essentially what Kwanzaa is all about. This year at Union Temple, I came up with a vision as I was looking for Donald Trump cohorts plan 2025. They had 4 major fronts, and the very first one was restoring the family. And of course, they were talking about another family, but it came to me at that point, given the critical nature of the Black family here in America today, that we needed to focus on the Black family in varied kinds of ways. So we're focusing on the nuclear family, we're focusing on the community family, the business family, all of these aspects of family and community. But it's about restoring, renewing, energizing ourselves with those principles that unfortunately we have lost a lot of in recent times, certainly not all of our own choosing. We've had mass incarceration, which has had a devastating effect on the Black family. We've had the crack epidemic, and we're experiencing the results of the 50th year anniversary of those 2 things that took so many families away from our community, not to mention gentrification. All of these factors have played a vital role in the demise of the Black family in terms of having those who are in an elderly station of life to pass on to the younger generation those principles and values that came from, if you will, grandmama and them, that we have kind of like lost and that we need to retain and recover.
Lori, in your book, author of 100, as the author of 111 places in Black culture in DC that you must not miss, Reverend Wilson talked about culture, and culture is in the title of your book. Is there a way that you see connect Kwanzaa to your research and your findings through your book and these 111 places in Black culture that we should not miss in Washington, D.C.?
Yes, absolutely. All of those principles are so critical for us to continue in order to just to unify and to move our community forward. And the book, and I'm going to hold it up just so people can kind of see. You might not be able to read it, but see what the cover looks like. This is 111 stories of Black culture here in Washington, D.C. So the principles that are outlined in Kwanzaa, you can find them throughout this book. Kujichagulia for today, when I was looking at that, I look at Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Now, that is a statue that most people don't even know exists, sitting on the corner of 9th and Rhode Island, but talking about how we have to African Americans have to speak for themselves, create for themselves, instead of being defined and spoken for by others. That's what he was about. He wanted African Americans to tell their own stories. He is a historian who is the father of Black history and the reason we have Black History Month. But he used to publish publications, do interviews right there at his home near 9th and Rhode Island, and send them out, go to the mail them out to schools and connect with people across the nation. And that's so closely tied to that principle. And you can find these, like I said, these connections throughout the book. So absolutely.
Dr. Wilson, talk a little bit about sort of the socio-economic and political situation that was going on in the 60s when Kwanzaa was established. Was that the root of Kwanzaa, the need of Kwanzaa? Because what was going on, especially in America at that time?
We had a double barrel kind of thing going on. We had the crisis in American cities. Dr. King, one of his most powerful speeches, which he spoke on 3 separate occasions before the American Psychological Association, before the board of SCLC, and then the speech titled Crisis in American Cities, following 150 riots all across this nation, the largest of which was in Detroit, where about 147 people lost their lives. So you had that fomenting all over the nation. Added to that was, oh my goodness, added to that was what was happening in the community, so far as a rise in consciousness among Black people. So with those 2 things happening at the same time, Dr. Maulana Karenga came up with these principles to instill in our community those values and those principles on the heels of all that was being done. We know today, for example, that the war on drugs was really a war on young Black males. And so that's where we got the almost 2 million being incarcerated, as opposed to in 1970 only being about 300,000. All of those things had a devastating effect. And at the same time, on this dual track, there was a rise in consciousness. We were reading books about our history. We were changing our attire, at least on a momentary basis for a lot of people, though it at that time was something that you saw everywhere. But all of these things contributed to the putting together these 7 principles of Kwanzaa, which incidentally we have been practicing at Union Temple now for the last 48 years consecutively. Even during COVID, we continue to practice those principles that have kept alive a sense of rejuvenating and reviving ourselves as we go into another year, because those principles of Kwanzaa are something to be lived, not to be just celebrated for 7 days, but to be lived 365 days out of the year.
And Lori, and in your research, as you now you have 111 sites, and my guess is usually once you start a book like this, you tend to have more than what the title is. So it says 111, but I'm sure there's like a whole more sites that you probably couldn't put in this book,
Right.
but are for the next book, right?
Right,
And,
exactly. Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, you go ahead. You jump right in.
I was going to say that with each story in the book, very easy read, picture and story. There is on a sidebar, kind of, there's a tip with every story. That tip is another place related either geographically or thematically or some kind of connection. So actually, there are 222 places in the book, realistically. And it's funny because just as you say, I ended up with a list of so many more places that I could not put in. I'm waiting to do the updates so I can get some more of those in. And I just want to echo what Dr. Wilson said so strongly, that this is to be lived 365 days a year. It's not just the 7 days after Christmas.
And Reverend Dr. Wilson, I'm sure there are some folks out there, right, who are traditionalists, and they look at Christmas as this is what should be celebrated. Kwanzaa, for those who push back against it, is this made up thing. And obviously, some could argue is Christmas sort of made up. It just depends, right? And so, you bringing that into the church, was there ever any pushback of like, hey, look, okay, we can kind of do this thing here and there, but let's not make it equal to Christmas? Or was there ever any debate that you saw, whether in your church or in religious circles in general?
Never in Union Temple's history has there been any confusion. Of course, that deals with the fact that here is an institution that historically has been consciously oriented in terms of dealing with our history and our culture and our people. So it was right in tune with what we have always done at Union Temple. Might I add is also, this does not have to be and should not be a substitute for Christmas, that it doesn't have to be either or. That people can still celebrate Christmas, but as well celebrate Kwanzaa, because Kwanzaa brings us into a deeper sense of who we are as a people, which is so critically important to us. Knowledge of self. We start talking about the critical race theory, for example, in terms of the impact of white supremacy and racism in every institution in this country. It's systemic. It's in government. It's in laws, in education. It's in economics. It's in religion. It's in everything that we do. And so it's critically important for us to have knowledge of self, and that is one of the major things that deters us from being who we can be and doing what we can do, is the lack of proper knowledge. It is that reason that many continue to try to prevent us as a people from knowing who we are, what our history is, what our contributions to civilization has been. And so it is critically important to celebrate Kwanzaa, and at the same time, you can celebrate Christmas all day, all December the 25th, but then there should be a sense that there is a need for us as a people to come together, to reevaluate where we are, where we're going, and to instill that culture, to instill that sense of community, that sense of family. When we start talking about family today, we talk about the fact as late as 1910, 80% of our Black households had a mother and father in the home. Now that's dwindled to about 31%. Without family, we talked about this on last night in Emoja. Without family, that's the root of everything. If you have a strong family, you have a strong community. If you have a strong community, you have a strong nation of people. And all the factors that have worked to cause a loss of family among our community is something that we need to try to revive. When I was talking to Dr. Karinga about this. And we've been talking for the last several months. When I first introduced the notion that this year at Union Temple, we would be focusing on various aspects of the Black family, the community.
Now, hold your thought there, Reverend Dr. Wilson. I want to pick up on that, but we got to take a quick break. Before we do, Reverend Dr. Wilson, if folks want to find you, get in touch with you, how can they do so?
Okay, they can go to the Union Temple Baptist Church website. And of course, we'll be live streaming live tonight on Union Temple, DC. They can, if they can't come in person, be great to come in person to see the great, beautiful African dancers and drummers and everything else that's going to take place on tonight. But they can tune in if they're not able to come in person at Union Temple, DC. It will be streaming live on tonight and all the way.
And Lori, if folks want to get your book, how can they do so or get in touch with you?
You can contact me through my website. My company is dctoursandevents.com, and website is just that, dctoursandevents.com.
And if they want to get your book?
Want to get the book, you can get it through my website. You can get an autographed copy. However, the book is available on Amazon in many local bookstores, and I do recommend we support our local businesses if we can, but it is available on Amazon. It's also in the Smithsonian's American and African American History Museums, as well as other locations. Pretty much anywhere books are sold, you should be able to get a copy.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. Don't forget, you can hear every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com, or you can download the 96.3 HD2 app on your smartphone and hear the program live in its entirety. This conversation continues online and on SiriusXM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on 96.3 WHUR. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on SiriusXM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2. I'm Bramante Bride in for Harold Fisher, and this is the Insight segment. Tonight, we're focusing on Kwanzaa and Black culture. Our guests tonight, two folks who can speak well on this topic. We have Reverend Dr. Willie Wilson, the pastor emeritus of Union Temple Baptist Church, and Lori Williamson. She's the author of 111 Places in Black Culture in Washington, D.C., that you must not miss. Reverend Dr. Wilson, I wanted to allow you to finish your conversation. You were saying at Union Temple that you are focusing, you're about to put a big focus on family, and I wanted you to be able to finish your thought there.
Right. Well, we were talking about not only the nuclear family, and we're doing something, if you ask the question, what is that one something that we can unify around? A lot of people have so many different things that they focus on as being valuable, important, but what is that one thing that keeps us from being unified? And it is the fact that we are Black people. When we understand who we are, and so that on nuclear family night, for example, we're going to have what some may consider to be just a traditional family, that is a husband, wife with children. Then we're going to have a blended family. We're going to have a single parent family. We're going to have a same-sex family. And the whole issue is finding a way to unify around our Blackness as a people, and not dealing with any of the pathologies that generally when you get Black people together, they start talking about how we're going to come together. Everybody's got a problem with the way somebody's doing something, what they think and how they function and how they act. But if we could find the reality that we are all Black people dealing with the same struggle. Malcolm X, when he spoke at church in Detroit, Michigan in 1967, the Ballad of the Bullet, he said, we got Martin Luther King Jr. down in Atlanta, but he's a minister, but he's not come as a minister. We've got Adam Clayton Powell in New York. He's a politician, but he does not come as a politician. We've got Reverend Clegg here in Detroit, but he does not come as a preacher in Detroit. He said, I'm a Muslim, but I do not come as a Muslim. We all come out of a sense of a common purpose, and that is the liberation and the freedom of our people. And when we understand that, that's what we're focusing on this week. Nothing about the problems and issues that we have with each other, but can we find that common ground? Dr. Dorothy Height, who was very dear to me and who worked with me during the Million Man March, she said, Reverend, one thing you have to understand. She said, I've participated in every march from the sleeping car porters, even now to this Million Man March. And she said, you have to find that common ideal, that common ground, that one something that everybody can agree on. And so I took that, went all across this country, getting pastors from every denomination you can name, every religion, every business, every social organization, every fraternity, every sorority, and finding that common ground of us being in a common struggle for the freedom and the liberation of our people. And that is what we need as a people. And that's what we have focused on this week, coming together, forgetting whatever to do. You don't like this, you can find a million things you don't like about everybody. But what can we find that we can agree on that will move us forward in terms of progress as a people, as a race of people?
Lori, when you were writing your book and compiling your book, and we're talking about family, some of the stories in the sites, was family integral or more structural places, or did you find stories throughout in terms of Black culture of family in Washington, D.C., tied to sites?
Yeah, the goal was actually to just make sure that I covered the entire city. And one question I did ask each person who I interviewed was how they tie their business or their service back to the African American community. So if it was in terms of family or something else, what is it? What is it that makes it important for you to give back to the community? And there were lots of examples that have to do with family and a lot of personal stories. But I think in the end, they're all stories that we need to teach our children. I saw an African proverb that said, "What you teach your child, you're teaching your grandchildren." So if we're not passing on these important principles and stories, they will be lost. You asked me earlier where people could buy the book, and I said local bookstores, Amazon, so on, so on. I forgot to mention the DC Public Library has picked up the book for all of their branches, and they confirmed for me that any references we have like this have been out of print for years. That's a little sad, but I'm happy to have been contributed. But I can't tell you how many people came and still told me stories about their families growing up in DC. And I said, the one problem is nobody's writing it down. We have a history in the African American community of storytelling,
And very
passing
oral.
on. So
Yeah.
we have to make sure that we're doing that. And so hopefully this book will help with that as well. Get out in terms of the celebrating 365 days a year. Get the book, pick a site you don't know about, and go out and visit it with your children, with your family, and discuss what that means and why it's important. Is we don't know our history, it's hard to kind of understand, especially for children, where they fit in the world, what they're supposed to do. It's like just so important. So yes, there are lots of stories of families, of seniors, of young people. So to me, it's a celebration as well. So I hope that again, focusing on all, as I was going through the principles of Kwanzaa, they're all just inherent in the book. So I hope that for that reason, it's picked up to help people, push them to get out and visit what's in their own backyard.
Which I think is fascinating for both of you, is that, Kwanzaa has so many sort of tentacles where they connect, to the community. And then these stories, whether you're telling them in Union Baptist Temple Church, whether you're telling them in your book, Lori, they're really all really interconnected. And so for you, Lori, before I go back to Reverend Dr. Wilson, I was interested in, just as somebody who's interested in history, really sometimes the key is finding those stories. And I know you're a tour guide. how did you find some of your stories? Where was your starting point to be able to tell these stories about Black culture in Washington, D.C.?
Well, it was interesting because my publisher, when they agreed to do this book, it was an idea I pitched to them. Um, it took them about 6 months, and they finally said, "Yes, we'll do it." Now, in my mind, it wasn't really a book yet. We were just talking idea. But when they came back to me and said, "We're ready to sign a contract," they said, "Before you start, we need all 111 places." Wait a minute, like I don't have them yet. So first, it was just a mad scramble, things I already knew, um, a little bit of Google, a little bit of talking to people, friends, and pretty much everything, knowing that it would all have to shake out. It's when I really started talking to people, and delving into their stories. And to be honest with you, some stories are not here just because I play phone tag with with people, but delving into it, it helped me to kind of determine what was going to be important and just reach out to people with a message. So many people were just so excited to be a part of it, to be able to tell their story. And I think that we can use this book to support Black business, part of the seven principles, to teach children, visit. There's so many ways to celebrate and engage. Go visit a mural. There's a great one in John Lewis over in Southeast, well, Capitol Hill kind of area. So many ways to engage, but it just kind of became a labor of love for me, just talking to these individuals who are able to tell their story to people who might not hear it otherwise.
Reverend Dr. Wilson, you mentioned the seven principles of Nguza Saba. Those are the seven principles, right? And so just
Right.
to go over them again: unity, self-determination, collective work and responsibility, cooperative economics, purpose, creativity, and faith. And, one of those that's kind of interesting to me, and I'd like to hear your take on where it falls in the community and how you see it. Creativity. What does that mean to you within Kwanzaa when we say creativity in the community? How is that manifest in your sense of the word?
It's manifest in terms of my dear sister's book that she just did, in terms of using your own mind and having a vision. And that's one of the things that we teach, to become a critical thinker. And if one does that, uh, things open up. Imagination is an amazing thing. It's the key to developing and growing and making things happen. Everything that you see right now first started as an idea in someone's mind. They imagined what they were thinking of, and then they moved from that to trying to make it happen, to create it. And that's something that is vital to the ongoingness of any group of people, to have a sense of creativity, to be able to produce something that did not exist. That becomes quite critical when we start talking about the Black community and what we must do as a people, to change many of the conditions and the situations that we find ourselves facing.
Lori, is there, this is always a tough question, whether or not somebody says, what's your favorite movie? What's been your favorite life experience? Who's your favorite child? If you never want, as a parent, somebody to ask you that, sometimes that might come up. Was there a favorite story or site or place out of those 111? Now, you can pick one, you can have a top three, but does anything stand out for you? And again, I go back to the fact that you're a tour guide. So not only do you write a book, but you walk these places. I'm not sure how you get folks to where you get them to, but you're there on the ground. Anything stand out for you in your book that readers should know when we read the book and we go, oh, this is the one?
Yes, I'm going to give you two that come
Okay.
right to the top of my head, and there are many more, but I'm going to give you two. One is Arlington National Cemetery. This is a place we don't really visit, and I'm actually working on a tour that's going to happen in February on Black history in the cemetery, where we visit the final resting place of many of the U.S. colored troops. And there's so many other African Americans there. Thurgood Marshall, Colin Powell, the women of the 6888 we've heard about recently in a documentary. Tuskegee Airmen, so many people that we should honor. It is actually probably my favorite place to go. Number two, I want to mention another place I don't think a lot of African Americans visit is George Washington's home, Mount Vernon. The life of the enslaved are talked about there. They actually have a tour, but it might be a little difficult to see, but I want to show the picture that goes along with that story. This is George Washington's home, Mount Vernon, and standing in front of it is a man named Rahulamin Kwander. His family, and he's also works as a tour guide, but his family is kind of known throughout. You might have seen some
The
references
Quanders.
to his name.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, but
Hmm.
his family can be traced back to serving as enslaved people here at Mount Vernon. He's also written a book about that, and they sell it in the shop there. But him standing in front of Mount Vernon is probably my favorite photo, just to bring that history together. Washington, some people still refer to it as Chocolate City. I do, but African Americans have been here since the beginning and have had impacts in so many ways that my book seeks to honor that every aspect of DC. There's African American culture ingrained in it. And so that's a place we should be visiting as well, where history happened. There's so few sites you can go to, like Frederick Douglass's home or Mary McLeod Bethune's home, where you can actually still go there and go in and take a tour. So that's one that we ought to visit.
Well, I have to sort of admit here, when you said Arlington Cemetery, part of my experience is I was a seasonal park ranger at Arlington House, which was Robert E.
Okay.
Lee's home. So I would concur with you because I worked in the house, had to talk about the cemetery, Freedman's Village, which
Mm-hmm.
was there before the cemetery came about, where many former enslaved folks made a home until they turned that area into a cemetery. So I would concur
Yes,
that that is a great place to go to learn more about the African American experience and those who were enslaved in that area and help build that house that's above President Kennedy's gravesite.
absolutely.
So that's a little bit of that story that I know a little bit more. Reverend
Yeah.
Dr. Wilson, I wanted to talk a little bit about the rituals and symbols, right, of Kwanzaa and
Mhm,
those that are associated with it.
mhm.
Um, can you talk a little bit about that? You know, symbols and rituals are so important
Okay.
in many organizations, you know, whatever the culture. But in terms of Kwanzaa, talk a little bit about the symbols and rituals and what they mean and why they're important.
My dear sister, in her comments about the book that she has written, speaks to the passing on of information and knowledge. When you talk about the principles of Kwanzaa, we start with the foundation, which is the straw mat, Mkeka, which speaks to the passing on of knowledge, of principles of family, of community, and culture from the elders. Then we have the muhindi, the ears of corn. If you look at a corn cob, ear of corn, you will see kernels. Those kernels represent the watoto, the children, the offspring, that if they are given a firm foundation through the telling of stories, through a knowledge that has been gained by the elders that went before them, that it is passed on in those seeds. Every one of those, you take some kernels from that corn cob and plant them in the ground, then you get more corn. So that's the whole idea of a progression of the knowledge that has been gained from previous generations, that is passed on from one generation to the next so that it's never lost. Then we have the Kinara, which is the candle holder, which holds the 7 candles, which represent the 7 principles of Kwanzaa. We have the Kikombe Chai Moja, the Unity Cup. When we started celebrating Kwanzaa 48 years ago, several of the pastors who joined in with us and community leaders, we would take that Unity Cup, and this was before COVID and a lot of other transmitted diseases that occurred. We passed that cup among each one of us. I dare say if you try to do that today, you get a whole lot of people
That's
backing
not
up.
going to work. Nope.
That's what we did, and again is a part of the richness of our culture in times past when you pass that cup and share, which is a symbol of unity, of togetherness. It's a libation, it's a drinking libation. We do a pouring libation. I have a bowl that I have soils that I've traveled to Egypt 3 occasions. We have soil from the slave dungeons at Cape Coast in Ghana, West Africa. We have soil from the slave dungeons at Goree Island. I have soil from the plantation in North Carolina where my ancestors were slaves, and we pour that libation, symbolizing a reawakening of the spirit of all of those who've gone before us in the struggle. Then we have the Zawadi. Those are the gifts that we share at Kwanzaa time, and we generally share a gift like a book or something that is meaningful that our young people can get something out of. Not to say there's anything wrong with a toy, but items that we give at Kwanzaa are items that we hope will be something that will help our young people to move to a higher level of consciousness of and self-awareness of who they are as human beings, as people.
Lori, I am always that I am a big photo person. I love looking at pictures. I love looking at old pictures, even new pictures, but really old pictures. It's just, you see those images, you're trying to figure out the story. Who is that person? Where are they? What's the context of this photo? And your book includes photos as well as text. Can you talk a little bit about the photos in the book, how they supplement the text? And how did you specifically have an idea of what you wanted in the book in terms of photos, old, new, updated? Can you sort of share your thoughts on the photographic nature of the book?
Yes, I appreciate your asking that because I want to mention the photographer, um, David Wardrett, who considers himself a digital storyteller, and he does a fantastic job with that. He's local and he was actually hired to take the photos in this book. So working together, I would tell him like whatever the place was, but here's what I will be talking about as far as that place, and then leaving it to him to take a series of photos, which we then looked through and kind of decided what was going to be best along with the publisher to help tell the story. There are a few photos that he did not take. We got from a place like actually Arlington Cemetery. We got that photo from them, but 90% of the photos he took. Just working together and trying to have the vision of that the picture matches the story. And yeah, it was a great experience, and I think it meshed together well. So every story has an accompanying photo.
And sort of following up on the story theme, Reverend Dr. Wilson, you've told the story here in our conversation from your perspective about Kwanzaa, but I am going to guess that there are some misunderstandings, for lack of a better word, maybe confusion of Kwanzaa, misconceptions. Has that been your experience? And if so, what are those misconceptions in your view?
Well, I don't think I'm not aware of misconceptions. I would call it rather a lack of knowledge, a lack of knowledge and information about what Kwanzaa is really all about. Added to that is the fact that we have been conditioned as a people to shun our own history and our own culture. It's not an easy thing to get our people to relate to our culture as a people. So I would say that is a hurdle in years past, not so much now as it was then in those initial years. For many of us, I think the Black consciousness movement helped to change that for some, and yet still others have that idea in their mind that anything about Africa, Malcolm said it quite well. People say, I didn't leave anything in Africa. Malcolm said, you left your mind in Africa. That's what you left in Africa. But we have to understand our history and our culture. The knowledge of who you are determines the what you become. What you think about yourself, what you think about, you bring about. And if you are limited in your knowledge of self, that very much limits what you do, what you become, and what you can do, and what you can become.
Lori, when we're
Vermont.
talking, yeah, go right ahead.
If I could just mention one
Sure.
thing I've noticed too, the misconception, which is a lack of knowledge, is that who some people who do not celebrate Kwanzaa are thinking it is a replacement for Christmas, and it's not, and they just haven't grasped onto it or gotten the knowledge to understand what it is. They don't know you could celebrate both. It's not a religious holiday. It's about culture and helping us connect with the true identity of African Americans. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
And this is probably a rhetorical question as we're sort of moving to a close, but how do you then convince people that it's not a replacement for Christmas? Is it just the more we have conversations like this, the more people read, which is always difficult to get folks to do? And I put that question out for both of you. Or how do you get people to understand this is really what it's about? It's not a better or worse, but it's just another.
Well, it's exposure. I had a sister last night. She was getting off the elevator coming into Kwanzaa. She said last year was her first year. And she said, I went to North Carolina for Christmas holidays, but I had to get back to celebrate this Kwanzaa because it's so exciting. It's so educational. It's so informative. And it's so us, who we are as a people, coming together, sharing together, the excitement, the joy of being together. When we get together as a people, we got a thing going on. You don't have to do a whole lot of talking. It just happens. We can walk into a train station and other people look and say, hey, do you know that person? And all of a sudden in 5 seconds, you got a 10 minutes conversation because that's who we are as a people. That's part of our culture. Being able to connect and communicate and with each other. And when people experience it, I would say it changes any thoughts they had about it not being important. I'll quickly dispel and discount it because they enjoy it so much and they get so much knowledge out of the speakers that we have, the information that is shared that enlightens and informs and inspires and encourages and strengthens people as to who they really are.
Well, that is definitely what this conversation has been. I appreciate both of you for being with us to explore Kwanzaa, to explore those 111 or 222 places in Washington, D.C. Black culture. Lori Williamson, again, before we leave the program, I want folks to know more about you if they want to do that and how they can get this important book.
Yes, I am a tour guide, as Bramante mentioned, here in Washington, D.C. I do all types of tours, whether it's a bus or a walking tour. If I have public tours available, they're on my website. Actually, everything is kept on my website. You're welcome to contact me if you'd like to arrange a tour, whether it's just family coming in town or family reunion. I do a lot of conferences, people are in town and want a variety of different tours. My website is DC toursandevents.com, dctoursandevents.com, and you can contact me through the website.
And find your book there as well, correct? And where they
find the
can
book
get it.
there as well. You can get an autographed copy sent to you.
All right. And Reverend Dr. Wilson, we have known you for a while. We know that you are knee deep in the community, but stuff is still going on at Union Temple Baptist Church, even as the pastor emeritus. Any things happening that folks should know about that you can let them know before we leave the program tonight?
Well, just that we've got this exciting Kwanzaa going on. And in fact, the founder of Kwanzaa, Dr. Maulana Karinga, is going to be with us on tonight. We have our traditional naming ceremony on the 30th. where we will be giving African names to about 18 people. And I must indicate as well to my dear sister, the next book you do, make sure you include Union Temple, because it's the only Black church in the United States of America that has a mural that is 30 feet wide, 19 feet high, with the Black Christ and significant Africans and African Americans seated at that table at a stature of 7 feet tall in height, each of them, in terms of how it is measured in terms of their size on that mural. That's something everybody needs to see. People come from all across the country to see that mural and all the history that we have in the lower level. Any person of note, from the Black experience, from Rosa Parks on down, you name it, they have been to Union Temple. It's quite a place to be and to see.
Reverend Dr. Willie F. Wilson, Pastor Emeritus of Union Temple Baptist Church, and Lori Williamson, author of 111 Places in Black Culture in Washington, D.C., that you must not miss. Thank you both for being with us tonight. That's the Daily Drum for this Friday, December 27th. I'm Bramante Bryant in for Harold Fisher. Have a great night and a fantastic weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.